Hello class, my name is Leon Wilson and today's presentation is on joint application design. According to Pressman's key point on requirements engineering establishes a solid base for design and construction. Without it, resulting software has a high probability of not meeting customer needs. As depicted in the Dilbert cartoon, requirements are needed in order to start the design of the system. In this presentation, we will look at a technique called joint application design. Joint application design is a well-known technique used for requirements gathering. What is joint application design? Joint application design is a technique for promoting cooperation, understanding, and teamwork among buyers, users, and developers. It provides a process that facilitates creating a shared vision of what the system should be. Using that process, the developers help the users formulate problems and explore solutions, and the users gain a feeling of involvement, ownership, and commitment to the success of the system. Joint application design was developed at IBM in 1977, and it has been applied successfully on hundreds of projects. It has been best used on information system projects, particularly for identifying system requirements, package requirements, and modification requirements for existing products. IBM reports that the use of joint application design has resulted in 20 to 60% gains in productivity. There are 6 types of participants that are key to the joint application design process. In this slide, I have listed those participants and a brief description of their responsibilities in the joint application design process. These participants are not involved in all phases of the joint application design process. It should be noted that the session leader is one of the most important participants. He or she has the responsibility for the overall success of the joint application design effort. Pause and think. Having the overall responsibility of the success of the joint application design process, what skills and/or abilities should the session leader possess and/or develop? Take 20 seconds. The session leader is the most important participant. Not only does the session leader need to be competent in the joint application design techniques, he or she would have to possess interpersonal skills, leadership skills, and the ability to guide and focus discussion, the ability to facilitate meetings, and the ability to deal with personalities and behaviors of the participants. The joint application design technique consists of 2 major steps. Those steps are the joint application design plan and the joint application design. The joint application design plan phase focuses on requirements gathering, while the design phase focuses on software design. In the remainder of this presentation, we will focus mainly on the joint application design plan phase. Both the plan and design phase consist of 3 phases: customization, session, and wrap-up. In the next slides, we will discuss each of these phases as it relates to the joint application design plan process. Customization phase. The session leader and analysts are responsible for the customization phase of the joint application design plan. This phase involves preparations for the session phase. The following steps are taken in order to complete this phase. Conduct orientation. The session leader and analyst basically conducts information gathering to determine the status of what has been accomplished and information about the system. During the phase, the session leader and analyst becomes familiar with the organization and the software being built and key people that will be involved in the joint application design plan process. Organize the team. Participants are selected by the session leader. The executive sponsor may also select participants for the session, but the responsibility lies ultimately with the session leader. The session leader also orients the participants to the task at hand prior to the actual session phase. Tailor the process. During this step, the session leader tailors the joint application design process according to the system being built. Meeting time, number of session meetings, and formats of documentation are subject to adjustments. Preparation material. Prepare materials. The session leader acquires the venue and necessary materials and resources for the session phase. Session phase. The session phase of the joint application design process consists of one or more meetings. These meetings are used to identify requirements for the system being designed. The steps are: conduct orientation. Participants in the session phase are greeted by the executive sponsor and session leader. Participants are acquainted with each other. The executive sponsor then provides a summary of what has taken place to date and also addresses the expectations of the participants of the session. Defined high-level requirements. The session leader gathers the high-level requirements through facilitated group discussion, objectives, anticipated benefits, strategic and future considerations, constraints and assumptions, and security, audit, and controls are areas that are examined during this step. The session leader asks already prepared questions pertaining to the 5 areas listed above. Requirements are identified and noted. Participants then evaluate and refine the requirements. Bound the scope of the system. Once the requirements are gathered, they are organized and the scope of the system to be built is established. In this step, participants should ensure the product is sufficient enough to meet the objectives, but being careful not to make it too large, which could incur more cost and increase complexity. The next 3 steps of this process is a part of the design process of joint application design. Identify and estimate joint application design designs. An estimation of resources needed, such as time and people, is conducted. Identify participants for joint application design step. Participants for the joint application design process are identified. Schedule joint application design meetings. The joint application design step structures is discussed by the individual selected to participate. Document issues and considerations. During the session process, issues that cannot be resolved and considerations that affect the design are documented for later review. Conclude the session phase. Session leader and participants review and discuss the information collected and review decisions made. Participants are given an opportunity to voice any additional concerns. That ends the session phase. The last phase of the joint application design plan process, is the wrap-up phase. The session leader is responsible for assisting the analyst in gathering information, documents, and charts produced during the session phase. This information is later combined into a formal planning document. This is completed using the following steps. Complete the joint application design plan document. The analyst transforms the product of the session phase into a specific formatted document. Review the joint application design plan document. The documentation produced by the analyst in the above step is provided to all participants of the session for their review and comments. Any comments that result in changes are reviewed and discussed in a separate meeting in order to come to a consensus. Obtain executive sponsors' approval. Once the analyst makes the revision to the planned document, it is given to the session leader. The session leader submits the documentation to the executive sponsor for approval. Once approved, all participants will receive a finalized copy of the documentation. The cartoon illustrates the session leader's special tactic used to obtain the executive sponsor's approval for the requirements. Pause and think. What is the main goal of the joint application design plan wrap-up phase? The main goal of the joint application design plan wrap-up phase is to transform the artifacts produced by the participants during the session phase into a formal planning document that includes software requirements. The joint application design technique is used to elicit system requirements for a system in its early stages. Participants identified to participate in this process identify and agree upon system requirements. By using this technique, companies will find that the time and cost related to requirements gathering are greatly reduced. This concludes my presentation on joint application design. Are there any questions?